You're listening to Fast Facts Perio Edition. And now, here's your host, Katrina Sanders.
Hello, and welcome to Fast Facts Perio Edition. This week, I'm bringing in the RDH, Kristin Evans. Welcome to Fast Facts. How are you?
I am so good. I am so excited to be here with you because
oh my gosh,
we just have so much in common, and I love being able to just talk and talk about the things that we need to as dental hygienists so that we can improve and be better.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it. So for our folks at home, or if you're driving to work listening to this, I think that's like where most people end up listening to us. Kristin Evans is a practicing dental hygienist, and she has really developed this fascination with spit and pH. So spit it out, Kristin. We're going to talk today about some of the basics in saliva and pH. So help me understand, Kristin, because when I was in hygiene school, I was taught about saliva and salivary amylase and, the buffering capabilities and IgA. But we learned all those microbiological things, right? But I feel like the greatest focus of what we had in hygiene school was around the Stefan's curve and how saliva supports on the buffering capacities around decay. I feel like that was like the focus of everything. Decay. If the patient has xerostomia, I need to be concerned about decay. And now we're beginning to really unpack this a bit more and acknowledge that it is impacting other oral diseases. So sort it out for us. Where are we right now inside of the current basics around saliva and pH, particularly as it relates to maybe oral inflammatory conditions?
Yeah. So pH is so important. Like I love to talk on this. I have my presentations on this because I call it the saliva is one of my presentations is called Saliva is the Lifeblood of Oral Health. Because truly the saliva is the lifeblood, just that it is so important. And we are starting to see the focus go into perio than it has been to dental caries, which has been the main focus. Like we said, we've always talked about that. Saliva is super amazing in that it is powerful in what it contains. It contains 99% water, though. I think people forget that it has a lot of water. So hydration is a big key. I'm a water fan, obviously. And then 1% is all the other things. So many things, including bacteria, which is our focus kind of today, is talking about that all these wonderful things are also in our saliva, but we also have bacteria. One of the neat things that is also in saliva is 1 drop of saliva tells us our whole DNA. It's our whole complex DNA is in 1 drop of saliva. Wow. So again, saliva is way more important than we're just thinking of dental caries, of the impact it has on our caries pH after eating, which is all super important. Those are all major important. But we do have to now look at perio. And bacteria grows in the pH of 5 to 7. It loves that range. And pathogenic bacteria, we know, survive and they actually thrive in that environment. And so as we're starting to look, there's more studies coming out about that. They're showing evidence that perio is increasing as salivary pH drops into the more acidic level. And that is creating more tooth loss. So as we are the perio experts, hygienists are, we need to start looking at, could the impact of my patient's saliva or saliva flow, or even the pH of their saliva, could it have more of an impact than just dental caries? And that's where we're going with the effects of that, the bacteria, along with the saliva, pH, and the whole body system in general. So we know that perio has the bacteria in it that starts to cause an inflammatory response. It causes the leaky mouth, which is something.
By the way, I love that. Can we? I love this leaky mouth because we talk about leaky gut syndrome, right? Hello, leaky mouth. Like that is exactly what's happening. And the mouth is the entryway to the gut. So I've heard that before and I love it. I'm obsessed with it. It's kind of like my new thing. So I'm going to borrow that. And I hope all of you listening are going to borrow that leaky mouth syndrome, because that's exactly what's happening. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it is called leaky mouth syndrome. And it is where it's the same thing as the gut, as we've learned. And our patients know when we talk about leaky gut, most of them have heard that.
That's
so
right.
Now we can relate it to the leaky gut. Now, I do have something I do in my presentations where now I'm going to go into this, is a balloon. If you take a balloon and you blow it up and then you tie it and let it sit. If you blow it up right away and you try to pop it with a pin, it's going to pop. But if you blow it up and you tie it and leave it for up to a week, and then you untie it because it has shriveled, then you untie it and blow it up again. Now this time it's been a week of inflamed, basically, right? And now it's shriveled. You blow it up again, and it will sometimes pop even when you blow it up, but it will definitely pop with your finger, not with a pin. Now that's because it has been leaked. I mean, it is stretched.
The latex is weakened, right? It's stretched out for a week and it's like, oh, the fibers of that latex, right?
Absolutely. And this is what we can talk to our patients about. This is basically something that we can utilize as a object lesson for our patients, because they can get that.
Yeah.
I see that. And that's what's happening in our mouth, is that breaching of and thinning of the membranes, and it's allowing then the bacteria in. Now, especially P. gingivalis, it loves the low pH. So if we have P. gingivalis in the perio pocket, which we do in periodontal disease, we've got the bleeding, we've got that leaky mouth. Now, those bacteria are now flowing back and forth into the bloodstream, and that then causes the systemic inflammation. And systemic inflammation is toxic. Systemic inflammation leads us to more chronic inflammation, and not just cardiovascular. That has been really on hygienists, oh yeah, we know it's cardiovascular. You have to floss to save your life. Well, it's much more than that. Every chronic inflammatory disease, including autoimmune diseases, including diabetes, insulin resistance is the pre-diabetes. I'm very into that. I'm into hormone health. All of those things are affected, and they have the chronic inflammation. So once we get that chronic inflammation, those diseases progress. We get the cytokines and other inflammatory markers are increased and let out into the body. And that is where our immune system then I'm heavy immune system. I can't do it anymore. And we're seeing this progression of the disease. And perio that's a big part of it. So saliva is a big part, because the pH changes.
Absolutely. And what I love about what you said is it really encourages us to think about what this disease process is quite differently. We know that periodontal disease is a bacterial infection, and more specifically, the clinical display of that bacteria is the host response, right? That's really where we see the sequelae of periodontitis. So yes, if somebody has an amazing, resilient immune system, the body can come in contact with bacteria, and the immune system will step in. It'll fight. It's when we see these immunocompromised cases and we get in contact with even the smallest minuscule of bacteria where we will see an exaggerated response. So we have to start thinking, and I know on previous Fast Facts, we've talked about this, the fact that we have to think about this from twofold, the presence of bacteria and the host response. And what's interesting is that it's cyclical, right? Because oftentimes when the host response is declined, it allows for bacteria to grow more readily, which drains on the immune system. And it's like the circle of life, right? But one of the things that I really love that you've shared that I think because we don't cover it in dental hygiene school, most of us aren't thinking about, is the fact that saliva and pH pave the way, or rather can pave the way for health or disease. And by that, we recognize if the saliva is in ample amounts and it can appropriately buffer, gosh, we're doing great. But this is interesting because you sent me this research study, and we're going to tag this in the show notes below. This research study actually goes over what the average pH of the oral cavity is. The study you sent me says what, 6.7 to 7.3.
Yes, 6.7 to 7.3.
Okay, so that's our typical oral pH, right?
Absolutely.
Inside of this, here, this is, I love this. P intermedia, Prevital intermedia, quite responsible for a lot of the hormonal inflammatory conditions we see, like pregnancy gingivitis we see in high concentrations of P intermedia, develops between a pH of 5 to 7.
5 to 7, the average, this is the pathogenic bacteria. They love that. And then that gets us back to that, wait, that's critical pH. Like
that's what I'm saying. That's crazy, right? So you're telling me if I have neutral pH, that P intermedia is still like chilling and living its best life. Here we've got P gingivalis, right? We know she's the queen bee of anything perio related. P gingivalis, 6.5 to 7 in that pH, P gingivalis. And then here's F nucleatum. F nucleatum, we know, is the true attachment bacteria. It chills along that gingival margin, right? And so as long as you have F nucleatum, your conversion or movement from gingivitis into periodontitis is going to be nice and swift and easy peasy. And F nucleatum is going to develop in a pH of 5.5 to 7. It's crazy to me. So now that we're starting to understand this, what are some of the things, as we wrap up this fast fact, what are some of the things that now that we understand that periodontal pathogens can in fact thrive in some of these really unique spans of pHs, how do we educate our patients? How do we communicate this to our patients?
Yeah, so I think doing the oral systemic, exactly what we talked about, that this is not just about your mouth, that this is not just about necessarily also just doing the average brushing and flossing. I mean, sometimes we have to care about the immune system. We've got to care about the saliva flow. Like we've got to find out what their saliva, what the pH of their normal saliva is. What are some of the, I think we will talk about some of the things that bring down that pH of the saliva. And we have to talk about that to our patients and for them to understand that it's much more than just, I wasn't brushing good enough, I wasn't flossing good enough. It has so many more moving parts. So we need to really start to educate our patients on saliva, how much we are having, like how much saliva we actually have.
Right.
And that's a big question that I actually deep dive into with my patients in the health history. And it's not on any health history. Like, what's your saliva? Like, do you have dry mouth? And you know, those are things that we really need to talk about to our patients. But definitely saliva, the pH. They can take their own pH test. They're cheap on Amazon. They can get one and test every morning. I like morning because I want to know if there's acid reflux involved. There's just so many moving parts to this that we could talk probably forever. But yeah, we do need to know about saliva, and we need to know about the flow rate of it because that is super important, and the pH of it. Those are two really important things because bacteria thrive in, and many of them can thrive in a neutral, even 7. And so we may need some things that are above that, and we need to control the bacteria that is itself creating more acid in the periodontal pocket. So
how incredible. I mean, truly, when you think about it, because you're spot on, now we're talking about acidic bacteria. The fact that now these bacteria can consume these fermentable carbohydrates and release lactic acid, which allows for the propagation and promotion of a more acidic environment. It is unbelievable when you really start to distill this down. And it is a conversation that we need to be having. So this is part 1. Stay tuned, y'all. Join me and the incredible Kristin Evans next week as we continue the conversation around all things pH. This has been another episode of Fast Facts Perio Edition with Katrina Sanders. Please feel free to reach me on Instagram at The Dental Wine Genist or on my website, www.katrinasanders.com. Cheers.